Hey, it's Andy Lovelace here, doing another do-it-yourself home improvement project. See this chair I'm sitting here looking at? Well, it's got cane underneath of it, and you can see, I tried to patch this thing for a long time, finally said, hey, we got to do something about this, we got to fix it. So, do-it-yourselfer, man. I'm all about experiencing new things, so I got on the internet, started looking at some YouTube videos, and it looks pretty straightforward. We're going to find out how difficult it is. So first thing I did is I just went and bought a tool that you'll see in a lot of the YouTube videos. Kind of looks like a little, some kind of little chisel screwdriver format. It's going to be used to take off all the caning around here on the edge and so forth. In fact, one of the first things I'm going to do is take off this cushion so that it's out of the way and not a problem for me. But anyway, the reason I'm creating this video is the ones I've seen, there's a lot of good videos out there on how to do this stuff. But what I'm finding out is a lot of times when you go to do it yourself, it's not so easy. Could I send this out and have somebody professionally do it? Absolutely. Could do that, but what fun would that be? And it's a beautiful spring day, so I just decided to sit out here in my driveway and work on this until I get this thing figured out. I was a teenager and I did some caning for my neighbors when I was a kid, but that was actually weaving the cane versus now you can buy actual mats. You can buy this stuff in a mat. So really all you got to do is take this edging out here, and once you take that out, put the next one in. You got to soften it up, put water and so forth. I'll tell the story as we go along. But anyway, step number one, they said on the easy instructions, is what you want to do is score around the edge here. You want to be real gentle about it so you don't tear up the wood. And that's going to start the process for loosening things up. Why am I doing this? Well, I always believe that YouTube's been tremendously helpful to me, watching all these other people do stuff, that everything from trapping moles in your backyard to fixing chairs to working on gutters. So I thought, you know what? I'll just go ahead and take time and create this video. Maybe I can help somebody else out along the way. Because a lot of times you see these people who are doing them and they're professionals and they make it look so easy, but then when you go to do it, it's not so easy. And actually, I've got another video out there on how to install a pedestal sink, and I'm glad. There's been about 13,000 views on it to date, so and I've gotten a lot of positive comments and stuff, so I'm glad that I'm able to help people get their own projects done. It's just a way to give back to the community. So, okay, now for the next step in the process, I spent some time scoring around the edges, both inside and outside spline here. And now you want to take this guy and kind of drop him underneath there real gentle and start to pry up that spline. Given that it's a kind of a decorative lacquer chair, I got to be real careful. Don't want to mess up the finish on this. So now I'm kind of starting to bring up that spline. It's coming out reasonably easy, but I still see some down there below that I got to dig out a little further. So they say that if it doesn't come out real easy, you can drill little holes along in here, along the spline, and you can put what they call white vinegar down in there, and I guess it will soften things up. But I've also heard people say, yeah, it gets real messy, it's a real pain, they don't use it. So I'm inclined to just follow their lead and just kind of inch my way along here piece by piece. I'm in no rush to do this. I get tired of doing this, I'll just go do something else for a while and come back to it. Looks kind of messy though. Looks like it's going to be kind of a tedious job here to kind of get through this, but we'll do it one step at a time here. Alright, here's a kind of an interim update. I've been working away at this, trying to get this spline stuff out of the edge here. I'm looking, yeah, it's 1:47, so I've been working on this about 45 minutes, and I've just gotten the two sides off. I'm finding the work to be very tedious. I'm not kind of a tedious kind of guy, but I do like experiencing things, so I'm willing to see it through, and it gives you a better appreciation for people who do this for a living and really are good at it versus just a do-it-yourselfer. So this is probably going to be one of those points I'll share in the video about you watch other videos and the guys make it look easy because they're good at it, but they edit a lot of stuff out, and I imagine so just doing two sides in an hour, I'll have another hour invested just getting the other parts out. And you really got to be careful because there's a glue and everything down here, so you really got to kind of keep working at it. I've got this lacquer finish here, so I've got to be real careful not to nick that up. I'm already starting to see a little bit of flaking here on the edges in the corner. Okay, so now I've been working on cleaning the spline and everything out, and it's been way more complicated than I thought because of that glue in there. And you can see this was like a black lacquer chair, and as I was taking this out using the kind of screwdriver chisel thing, you can see the glue actually pulled off some of the lacquer, which is a real bummer. We're going to try to figure out how to touch that up. But looking back on this, I mean, you really want to get this thing clean all the way down there. You don't want to have any residual left in there. And looking back on it, instead of using a chisel, I was thinking I probably could have used my Dremel tool, and it's got a little head on it, you know, not quite like a drill bit, but I think I could have just drug that thing down through there and cleaned all this out without prying up the old spline, which the prying part, the glue was on the side and it caused some of this to chip. So just a learning on my part as I go around this. But I think I'm at a point now where the spline, you know, that's all been really cleaned out well. And now I'm at a point where I'm going to start putting the mat in and going there to finish it up. And then we'll have to figure out how to touch up this black paint on there. Okay, so here we are, jumping ahead now that I had the groove all cleaned out real good and everything. You know, I just bought a piece of the pre-made cane, you know, it just comes in sheets, and I took some scissors and cut it out so that it was about the right size for the opening. And then pretty much just follow these instructions, and again, I'll drop it on here. This is the company that I found on Amazon that, you know, that gave easy instructions, pretty easy to follow along. And I just peel out these extra strips of cane along the outside here to make it easier to make the cane go in. And then all I'm doing, like I said, is making sure that it's square on the chair and everything. They repeatedly stress that because it's going to be harder to do that as you go along. And then you just put the 4 different wedges in there. Now it turned out the wedge that I'm using here, one of these little, they're different size wedges. There was kind of 4 bigger ones and then 1 smaller one. I actually ended up having to cut, I just went out and used a miter saw and I cut the tip of this off so that it was fatter to fit in my groove. So this one's been cut down and it's holding nicely. So all I'm doing is sitting here and just kind of using a hammer and tapping away to get all these in the groove. And so far it's been pretty easy. You know, the harder part I think was getting the old spline out and all the old glue and being patient. That took about 3 hours. This has just taken me 5 or 10 minutes. So, okay, now you can see that I've went around the groove and I got all the cane kind of pounded down in there. And I forgot to mention earlier that I actually soaked the cane for about 30 minutes. Now, some of the instructions actually said to use like a 1.5 inch chisel that you would cut off this extra cane, and I'm a little worried about, you know, nicking up any of the lacquer or anything. So they also suggested just using some nippers here or some wire cutters, and it seems like that's going to work pretty well because I can just kind of give it a haircut and trim it off right at the level surface. So I think this is going to work out real well for me. Don't know if that applies to other people, but okay. Now I've actually managed to get the new piece in place. I've tapped it all the way around and I've trimmed off I just used some standard kind of wire cutters like that, and it seems to have worked pretty well for me. But anyway, I've kind of got it all around the groove. Now what I'm going to do is one more time I'm going to go around and make sure that everything's, run my hand along there, make sure everything's trimmed off nice and smooth. And then I'm going to take the little wooden wedge and I'm going to go ahead and go around it one more time before I start to put the spline in, which would happen next. You can see a few of these marks here on the chairs are visible. The other ones are hidden by the spline, but those will have to be touched up. Alright, well, here's my first cane chair, and it's definitely a rookie job, but I always like getting experiences of doing things at least once because it makes you appreciate the people who do this full time, you know. The other thing is, it looks like this is like the standard spline they call for. Well, let me show you an existing chair here, and you can see they had somewhat a much bigger spline than maybe what they provided in the kit. So when I was tapping it in, it sunk down in there. Now the good thing is it's tight. This will get tighter as it dries up, is from what I understand. So the chair is definitely going to be usable, whereas before it wasn't usable. And so we're in business, and there's going to be a cushion that pops over it like this. So we're going to be in great shape, because at least it'll be a usable chair again. If you ever had to, pop it off there, clearly it wouldn't look as good. But looking back on it, I think my learning is that I would be a lot more patient, and even if it took 2 or 3 sessions for me to get through it, in taking the spline out, because that's the most difficult part. That took about 3 hours in total to actually install the new sheet, trim off all these items. And you can see actually there's some that are sticking up here. What I'm going to go back and do is use my 1.5-inch chisel now, and I'll just kind of very gently chip those off of there, so that it looks real clean and everything. So anyway, thanks. Hey, if this was helpful to you, give us a thumbs up, and certainly if it helps somebody else, share it with them so they can learn too. This is your do-it-yourself guy who's never caned a chair before. Over and out.